Let me invite you to settle into this quiet evening moment with me. Outside your window, the world is slowly dimming, the last traces of daylight fading into that gentle twilight blue that wraps around everything like a soft blanket. Perhaps you can hear the distant sounds of the day winding down. A car passing somewhere far away, the settling of your home around you, the comfortable silence that fills the spaces between sounds. Tonight, we're going to travel together through an extraordinary story that spans 12,000 years, but there's no rush, no urgency. We have all the time we need. This is a story about one of humanity's most successful partnerships, one that began in the dusty grain stores of ancient villages and continues in millions of homes across the world today, including perhaps your own. As you rest, imagine the soft weight of a sleeping cat curled nearby, the gentle rumble of a purr, that ancient sound that connects us across millennia to people who lived so long ago they would seem like strangers, yet who shared something fundamental with us, the companionship of cats. Let your breathing slow, let your body sink deeper into comfort, and let's begin this long, winding journey through time together, following the paw prints of cats as they walked alongside humanity, sometimes leading, sometimes following, always remaining just slightly apart, independent, mysterious, and utterly captivating. Our story begins not in the domesticated world we know, but in a wilder time, when the ancestors of our house cats prowled through landscapes that would be barely recognizable to us today. Picture the region known as the Fertile Crescent, that arc of land stretching from the Persian Gulf through modern-day Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, and into Egypt. This was approximately 12,000 years ago, give or take a few centuries, a time when human civilization itself was undergoing its most dramatic transformation. The wildcats of this era, known scientifically as Felis sylvestris libica, or the African wildcat, were solitary hunters perfectly adapted to their environment. These animals were slightly larger than most modern house cats, with longer legs suited for covering the open territories they claimed as their own. Their coats were typically sandy or grayish-brown, marked with subtle tabby stripes that provided excellent camouflage against the rocky desert edge habitats they preferred. Their ears were proportionally larger than those of today's domestic cats, the better to hear the tiny movements of prey in the quiet hours of dusk and dawn. These wildcats were magnificent hunters, employing tactics refined over millions of years of evolution. They specialized in small prey, mice, rats, small birds, lizards, and insects. Their hunting strategy relied on patience and explosive bursts of speed. A wildcat might sit motionless for an hour, watching a rodent burrow, every muscle coiled and ready, before launching an attack that lasted mere seconds. Their success rate was impressive, their survival depending on their ability to read their environment with senses far sharper than those of the humans who were beginning to reshape the landscape around them. The wildcats were, by nature, solitary and fiercely territorial. An adult male might claim a territory spanning several square miles, marking its boundaries with scent and defending it against other males. Females maintained smaller territories that sometimes overlapped, coming together only during breeding season. These were not social animals in the way that wolves or early dogs were. They didn't form packs, didn't hunt cooperatively, didn't have the same drive to join human social groups that made wolves such natural candidates for domestication. And yet, everything was about to change, not because of anything the cats themselves chose, but because humans were embarking on a revolution that would transform the world, the agricultural revolution. Around 10 to 12,000 years ago, humans in the Fertile Crescent began to transition from a nomadic hunting and gathering lifestyle to something radically different. They started to cultivate wild grasses, the ancestors of wheat and barley. They began to settle in permanent villages, building structures from mud brick and stone. They domesticated sheep, goats, and cattle. This change didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual process spanning many human generations, but its effects were profound. One of the most significant changes brought about by agriculture was the storage of grain. For the first time in human history, people were accumulating substantial food surpluses, storing harvested grain in granaries, pits, and storage vessels. These concentrated food sources created an ecological opportunity that hadn't existed before. They became magnets for rodents. Mice and rats, those opportunistic and highly successful mammals, found the grain stores irresistible. Here was food in abundance, protected from the elements, concentrated in predictable locations. Rodent populations exploded around human settlements. Where you had grain, you had mice. Where you had mice, you had a serious problem. These rodents didn't just eat the grain. They contaminated it with their droppings and urine, spread diseases, and could quickly destroy months of hard work and carefully stored food supplies. The early farmers tried various methods to protect their grain. They built better storage structures, elevated granaries off the ground, used pottery vessels sealed with clay. But the mice were persistent and remarkably adaptable. What the farmers needed, though they probably didn't realize it at the time, was a natural predator, one that specialized in exactly the kind of prey that was plaguing them. Enter the wildcats. The wildcats that lived in the areas surrounding these early farming villages began to notice the unusual concentration of prey around human settlements. From a cat's perspective, these villages represented a remarkable opportunity. Instead of having to patrol a large territory to find scattered prey, here were locations where mice and rats congregated in huge numbers, all in one convenient place. The boldest and least fearful of these wildcats began to venture closer to human habitations, especially during the hours of dusk and darkness when humans were less active and mice were emerging to feed. These cats found that they could hunt quite successfully on the edges of human settlements without having to interact directly with people. The humans, for their part, likely noticed these feline visitors and the reduction in rodent problems that coincided with their presence. This was the beginning of what scientists call a commensal relationship, a relationship where one species benefits while the other is neither harmed nor helped, or in this case, where both species benefit without actively collaborating. The cats got easy access to abundant prey. The humans got natural pest control. Neither had to do anything special to maintain this arrangement. The cats remained wild, coming and going as they pleased, raising their kittens in den sites away from human activity. But over time, something subtle began to shift. The wild cats that were naturally less fearful of humans, that could tolerate closer proximity to human activity, that didn't flee at the sound of human voices or the sight of human movement. These individuals had an advantage. They could access the best hunting grounds more consistently. They could feed more efficiently. And crucially, they survived and reproduced more successfully than their more skittish relatives. This is natural selection at work. Not directed by human intention, but nevertheless shaped by human presence. Generation by generation, the cats that hung around human settlements were becoming subtly different from their purely wild cousins. They weren't being actively bred or selected by humans. The early farmers weren't capturing cats or choosing which ones could mate. The cats were selecting themselves, with the boldest individuals thriving in this new ecological niche that humans had inadvertently created. We can imagine what this might have looked like. Picture an early farming village at dusk, the work of the day winding down, cooking fires being lit, people gathering to share evening meals. On the periphery, barely visible in the fading light, a tawny shape moves with liquid grace between the storage buildings. A wild cat, its eyes reflecting the firelight, pauses to watch the humans, assessing, calculating. Somewhere nearby, a mouse rustles through spilled grain. The cat's attention shifts instantly, ears swiveling, body lowering. In a burst of movement almost too fast to follow, the hunt is over. The cat carries its prize to a shadowy corner to feed, then settles for a moment, grooming, its purr a low rumble that blends with the evening sounds. This scene, or countless variations of it, played out night after night, year after year, century after century. The relationship deepened through sheer proximity and mutual benefit. Perhaps children watched the cats and found them fascinating. Perhaps someone left out scraps of food, noting that a well-fed cat still hunted mice but seemed calmer, less likely to dart away at every movement. Perhaps in the slow turning of seasons and generations, the distance between wild cat and human began to shrink, not through any grand plan, but through the simple accumulation of small tolerances and tiny adjustments. Archaeological evidence supports this gradual process. Researchers have found cat bones at human sites dating back 9,500 years in Cyprus, an island that had no native wild cat population. The only way cats could have arrived in Cyprus is if humans brought them, suggesting that by this time, the relationship between humans and cats had progressed beyond mere commensalism. Someone valued these cats enough to transport them across water to a new territory. The ancient village of Chilarokambos in Cyprus has yielded one of the most remarkable pieces of evidence for early cat domestication. A grave site dating to approximately 7,500 years ago containing the remains of a human buried deliberately alongside a cat. The cat's bones showed no signs of butchery or violence. It was clearly placed in the grave intentionally, positioned near the human in what appears to be a gesture of companionship or significance. This burial suggests that by this point, at least some humans had developed emotional bonds with individual cats, viewing them not merely as useful pest controllers but as companions worthy of ritual and respect. The genetics of modern house cats tell us more about these ancient relationships. Through DNA analysis, scientists have traced the ancestry of today's domestic cats to those North African and Near Eastern wildcats, specifically to 5 founding female lineages. This means that all of the world's domestic cats, from the sleekest Siamese to the fluffiest Persian, from alley cats in Tokyo to barn cats in Kansas, can trace their maternal ancestry back to just 5 individual female wildcats who lived in the Fertile Crescent thousands of years ago. 5 mothers, 5 family lines that spread across the world and diversified into all the variations we see today. This genetic bottleneck tells us something important. The domestication of cats wasn't a single event that happened in one place at one time. Instead, it appears to have occurred through multiple interactions and relationships across a broad geographic area, with different populations of cats establishing connections with different human communities. The process was gradual, decentralized, and in many ways, driven as much by the cat's own choices as by human actions. Unlike dogs who were actively bred and selected by humans for specific tasks like hunting, herding, or guarding, cats largely domesticated themselves. They entered human society on their own terms, remained semi-independent, and never became the obedient servants that dogs did. This fundamental difference has shaped the entire subsequent history of human-cat relations. Cats never needed humans the way dogs did. They chose to be near us, and they could always choose to leave. This independence, this quality of being both with us and apart from us, has been part of the cat's charm from the very beginning. If the Fertile Crescent was where the cat's journey with humanity began, then ancient Egypt was where this relationship reached its most elaborate and extraordinary heights. For more than 3,000 years, cats occupied a position in Egyptian society unlike anything seen before or since. They were not merely tolerated or even valued. They were venerated, protected by law, celebrated in art, and elevated to the status of sacred beings associated with divinity itself. The relationship between ancient Egyptians and cats deepened around 4,000 years ago, during the Middle Kingdom period, though evidence suggests cats had been present in Egypt for much longer. The Egyptian climate and agricultural system created ideal conditions for cats. The Nile River, flooding annually to deposit fertile silt across the valley, made Egypt one of the most productive agricultural regions in the ancient world. With agriculture came grain storage on a massive scale, and with grain came rodents in equally massive numbers. Cats found themselves in paradise, a land where prey was abundant and the climate mild enough that they could be active year-round. But the Egyptian relationship with cats went far beyond practical pest control. The Egyptians, who saw divine presence in many aspects of the natural world, recognized something special in cats. They observed the cat's hunting prowess, its ability to see in darkness, its grace and beauty, its fierce protection of its young, its cleanliness, and its mysterious nature. All of these qualities resonated with Egyptian religious and cultural values. The cat became associated with several Egyptian deities, most famously Batet, though also with Sekhmet, Mathday, and other divine figures. Batet, initially depicted as a fierce lioness but later shown as a woman with a cat's head or as a domestic cat, was one of Egypt's most beloved goddesses. She represented protection, fertility, motherhood, music, dance, and joy. Her cult center was in the city of Bubastis in the Nile Delta, where enormous festivals were held in her honor. The Greek historian Herodotus, writing in the 5th century before the Common Era, described these festivals at Bubastis as among the most popular in all of Egypt, with hundreds of thousands of people making pilgrimages to the city. He wrote of processions, music, dancing, and enormous quantities of wine consumed in celebration. The goddess's sanctuary contained bronze statues of cats, and pilgrims would commission these statues or cat mummies as offerings, hoping to gain the goddess's favor. In Egyptian homes, cats were cherished family members. Wealthy families in particular kept cats as beloved companions, not servants. Egyptian art from tombs and temples frequently depicts cats in domestic settings, sitting beneath chairs during banquets, eating fish offered by their owners, wearing decorative collars, playing with toys. These weren't generic representations but often individual portraits, showing specific cats with distinct markings and features, suggesting that these were real animals being commemorated, not symbolic or idealized images. The death of a household cat was treated as a significant loss. When a family cat died, the household would go into mourning. Herodotus reported that family members would shave off their eyebrows as a sign of grief, a striking gesture in a culture where appearance and grooming were highly valued. The deceased cat would be mummified with great care, wrapped in linen, sometimes placed in an elaborately decorated sarcophagus, and buried in special cat cemeteries. The scale of cat mummification in ancient Egypt is staggering. Archaeological excavations have uncovered cat cemeteries containing hundreds of thousands of mummified cats. Some estimates suggest that millions of cats may have been mummified over the course of Egyptian history. These weren't all beloved pets. Many appear to have been raised specifically for religious purposes, to be offered as gifts to the gods. Pilgrims visiting temples could purchase a mummified cat to offer as a devotional act. This created an industry of cat breeding and mummification centered around major religious sites. The discovery of these massive cat cemeteries in the late 19th and early 20th centuries led to one of the more unfortunate chapters in archaeological history. Many thousands of cat mummies were shipped to England where they were ground up and sold as fertilizer, their historical and scientific value not recognized until too late. However, enough specimens survived to give us detailed insights into the cats of ancient Egypt. Modern examination of these mummified remains reveals that Egyptian cats were predominantly of a slender, long-legged type, similar in build to modern Abyssinian cats. Many showed the classic mackerel tabby striped pattern, though spotted and even plain-colored individuals are also found. These cats were slightly larger on average than many modern domestic breeds, suggesting they were still quite close to their wild ancestors in physical form, even if their behavior had been shaped by centuries of living alongside humans. Cats in ancient Egypt enjoyed legal protections that were extraordinary for any animal. Killing a cat, even accidentally, could be punished by death. This wasn't merely symbolic. There are historical accounts of mob violence against people who harmed cats. Diodorus Siculus, another Greek historian, recounted witnessing a Roman soldier being killed by an Egyptian mob for accidentally killing a cat, despite attempts by Egyptian authorities to intervene. This occurred during a period when Rome was already exerting pressure on Egypt. Yet not even fear of Roman retribution could save the soldier from the fury of people who saw the killing of a cat as an unforgivable crime. The Egyptian reverence for cats extended to trade restrictions. Cats were so valued that the pharaohs attempted to maintain a monopoly on them, forbidding their export. Special agents were supposedly dispatched to foreign ports to buy back any Egyptian cats that had been smuggled out of the country. This policy was ultimately unsuccessful. Cats are difficult to contain, and merchants and sailors recognized their value for controlling rodents on ships and in foreign ports. Despite Egyptian efforts, cats began to spread throughout the Mediterranean world, carried by Phoenician and Greek traders to new lands and peoples. The role of cats in Egyptian religion went beyond Batet. The goddess Mafde, one of the earliest feline deities, was depicted as a woman with a cat's head and was associated with justice and the execution of enemies. Sekhmet, though typically shown as a lioness, shared associations with domestic cats and represented both destructive and protective power. The sun god Are was sometimes said to take the form of a great tomcat in his nightly battle against the serpent of chaos, Apophis. In this myth, the cat became a protector of cosmic order, a warrior against darkness and disorder. Egyptian cats appear frequently in magical texts and protective spells. Cat fur, whiskers, and other parts were used in amulets and charms. Images of cats were painted or carved on tomb walls to protect the deceased in the afterlife. The cat's ability to see in darkness, to move silently, to fight off serpents and vermin, made it a powerful symbol of protection against both physical and spiritual threats. In Egyptian art, cats are depicted with remarkable care and attention to detail. Artists captured the distinctive features of different individual cats: the curve of the tail, the set of the ears, the pattern of stripes or spots. Cats appear in hunting scenes and tomb paintings, shown retrieving birds for their human companions in the marshes of the Nile Delta. These scenes show cats performing tasks usually associated with dogs in other cultures, suggesting that some Egyptian cats were trained for hunting purposes, adding another dimension to their relationship with humans. The famous statue of a cat from the Geyer-Anderson collection, now in the British Museum, exemplifies the Egyptian aesthetic regarding cats. Cast in bronze with inlaid eyes, wearing golden earrings and nose ring, the statue represents not just a cat but an individual of status and beauty. The cat sits upright in a pose of alertness and dignity, embodying the qualities the Egyptians most admired: grace, vigilance, independence, and mysterious power. The cult of Batet and the broader Egyptian reverence for cats persisted for millennia, surviving dynastic changes, foreign conquests, and cultural upheavals. Even after Alexander the Great conquered Egypt in 332 before the Common Era, cat worship continued under the Ptolemaic dynasty. It wasn't until the rise of Christianity in Egypt, centuries later, that the religious significance of cats began to fade, though cultural affection for them never entirely disappeared. The Egyptian chapter in cat history is significant not just because of the unique status cats achieved there, but because it represents the fullest flowering of the human-cat bond in the ancient world. Here, cats transcended their practical role as pest controllers to become cultural icons, religious symbols, beloved companions, and protected beings. The Egyptian relationship with cats influenced neighboring cultures and, through trade and conquest, helped spread both cats themselves and positive attitudes toward them throughout the ancient world. From their origins in the Fertile Crescent and their elevation in Egypt, cats began a journey that would eventually take them to nearly every corner of the world inhabited by humans. This spread was gradual, unfolding over thousands of years, carried forward by traders, soldiers, colonists, and the cat's own reproductive success and adaptability. The Phoenicians, those master sailors and traders of the ancient Mediterranean, played a crucial role in cat dispersal. Operating from cities like Tyre, Sidon, and Carthage, Phoenician merchants established trading networks that stretched from the Levant to Spain, from North Africa to the British Isles. Their ships, loaded with precious goods like purple dye, glasswork, and timber, also carried something perhaps more precious: cats. Ship captains quickly learned that cats were invaluable crew members. The holds of ancient ships, filled with grain, dried fish, and other foodstuffs, were magnets for rats and mice. These rodents didn't just eat the cargo. They gnawed through ropes, contaminated water supplies, and spread disease in the confined quarters of a ship. A good ship's cat could mean the difference between a profitable voyage and disaster. Phoenician traders, acquiring cats from Egypt and Near Eastern ports, began taking them along on trading expeditions. When these ships made landfall at distant ports, cats sometimes escaped or were deliberately left behind to control rodents in warehouses and granaries. They bred with local wildcat populations where they existed, or established new populations where no cats had lived before. Islands throughout the Mediterranean and beyond received their first cats this way. Cyprus, Crete, Malta, Sicily, Sardinia, Corsica, the Balearic Islands, all acquired cat populations through maritime trade. The Greeks, great admirers of Egyptian culture, adopted the Egyptian appreciation for cats, though they never quite matched Egyptian levels of veneration. In Greek art and literature, cats appear less frequently than in Egyptian sources, but when they do appear, it's usually in a positive light. Greek vases occasionally show cats in domestic settings, and there are written references to cats as household companions. The Greeks used the word ailuros for cats, and the phobia of cats, ailurophobia, takes its name from this Greek root. One famous Greek mosaic from the 3rd century before the Common Era, found in the ruins of Pergamon in modern Turkey, shows a highly detailed scene of cats attacking birds. The artistry is remarkable, capturing the explosive energy of the hunt, the terror of the prey, the focus of the predator. This wasn't functional art. It was meant to be admired, suggesting that cats had become culturally significant enough to warrant such elaborate artistic treatment. Roman attitudes toward cats were more complex. The Romans initially preferred ferrets and polecats for rodent control, animals that could be more easily trained and controlled than the independent cats. However, as Roman power expanded across the Mediterranean and into northern Europe, cats became increasingly common in Roman territories. Roman soldiers, stationed in distant provinces, often kept cats as companions and pest controllers. Roman merchant ships carried cats to every port in the empire's vast trading network. In Roman Britain, archaeological sites have yielded cat remains dating to the 1st through 4th centuries of the Common Era, during the Roman occupation. These were clearly domestic cats, not wild cats, found in association with human settlements, grain stores, and military installations. When the Romans eventually withdrew from Britain in the 5th century, they left behind many things, including an established cat population that would continue to thrive. Roman art includes more representations of cats than Greek art did, though still far fewer than Egyptian art. Some Roman mosaics show cats in hunting scenes or as household companions. One remarkable mosaic from Pompeii depicts a still life featuring a cat catching birds, rendered with lifelike detail and clearly meant to showcase the artist's skill at capturing natural behavior. Meanwhile, cats were also spreading eastward into Asia through overland trade routes. The Silk Road, that network of trade paths connecting the Mediterranean world with China, served as a corridor not just for goods and ideas but also for animals. Cats, valued by merchants and caravan operators for the same reasons ship captains valued them, traveled east with traders. India received cats relatively early, possibly through trade with the Persian Empire or through maritime connections with the Red Sea and Persian Gulf. Ancient Indian texts mention cats, though usually in passing and without the religious significance they held in Egypt. Cats in India had to compete for human attention with other animals that held religious importance. Cows, elephants, monkeys, but they found their niche as practical helpers in grain stores and homes. China's relationship with cats developed along different lines than in the West. Chinese wild cats existed, but the domestic cats that became most common in China appeared to have arrived from the Western regions, likely through Silk Road trade. By the time of the Han Dynasty 2,000 years ago, cats were well established in Chinese civilization. In Chinese culture, cats occupied an interesting position. They were valued for pest control but also appeared in art, literature, and folklore. Chinese artists, with their tradition of careful nature observation, produced many paintings of cats, often depicting them with remarkable realism and beauty. The Tang Dynasty in particular, from the 7th to 10th centuries, saw cats become popular subjects in poetry and painting. Cats were associated with wealth and prosperity, as their rodent hunting skills protected valuable grain stores and silk production. However, Chinese attitudes toward cats were ambivalent in ways that Egyptian attitudes never were. Some folk traditions viewed cats with suspicion, associating them with supernatural abilities or bad luck. The cat's nocturnal habits, its glowing eyes, its ability to move silently. These same traits that made cats mysterious and appealing in some cultures made them slightly sinister in others. This ambivalence would appear in various forms in different cultures throughout cat history. Japan's cat history began later than China's, with cats likely arriving from the Asian mainland around the 6th century during the introduction of Buddhism. According to tradition, cats were brought to Japan specifically to protect Buddhist scriptures from mice and rats. The Japanese Emperor Yuda, writing in the late 9th century, left one of the earliest written descriptions of a cat in Japan, describing a black cat he received as a gift and praising its beauty and amusing behaviors. In Japan, cats eventually achieved a cultural status rivaling their position in ancient Egypt, though expressed in different ways. Japanese art, literature, and folklore are rich with cat imagery. The famous Maneki Neko, or beckoning cat figurine, now ubiquitous in Japanese restaurants and shops worldwide, emerged from Japanese folk traditions associating cats with good fortune and prosperity. Japanese woodblock prints frequently featured cats, both realistic and fantastical. The artist Utagawa Kuniyashi was particularly famous for his cat prints in the 19th century, creating works that showcased his love of cats and his acute observation of feline behavior. In Southeast Asia, cats appear to have arrived through both maritime trade with India and overland routes from China. The distinctive cats of Thailand, now known as Siamese, had developed by at least 600 years ago, as evidenced by their depiction in ancient Thai manuscripts. These cats, with their distinctive color points, blue eyes, and vocal nature, were treasured in Thai culture and sometimes given as diplomatic gifts to honored foreigners. Africa, beyond Egypt, received cats through multiple routes. North African populations spread westward along the Mediterranean coast with Phoenician and Roman expansion. Cats also moved south along the Nile and through Red Sea trade routes into East Africa. By the time of the major Islamic expansion in the 7th and 8th centuries, cats were well established throughout North Africa and the Near East. Islamic culture generally viewed cats favorably, in part due to traditions about the Prophet Muhammad's fondness for cats. Stories describe Muhammad cutting off the sleeve of his robe rather than disturb a cat sleeping on it, and of a cat named Muetza who was said to be his companion. In Islamic law, cats are considered ritually clean animals, unlike dogs, and are welcome in mosques. This positive religious and cultural context helped ensure that cats flourished in Islamic territories from Spain to India, from the Caucasus to East Africa. Europe north of the Mediterranean received cats primarily through roaming expansion and later through maritime trade. Britain, as mentioned, had cats by the Roman period. Archaeological evidence shows cats becoming more common throughout medieval Europe, found at sites from Ireland to Poland, from Scandinavia to the Iberian Peninsula. Viking ships carried cats to Iceland and possibly to Greenland and even North America, though these latter populations didn't persist. By the beginning of the Common Era, roughly 2,000 years ago, cats had established themselves throughout most of Eurasia and North Africa. They were present on countless islands. They had adapted to climates from the Near Eastern deserts to the forests of Northern Europe. They had integrated into dozens of different human cultures, each of which developed its own traditions and attitudes toward these animals. The cat's success in this global spread was remarkable given that they were never subjected to the intensive breeding and selection that dogs underwent. Dogs were deliberately bred for specific tasks: hunting different types of game, herding different types of livestock, guarding, pulling sleds, and so on. This led to the enormous diversity of dog breeds, from tiny Chihuahuas to massive Great Danes. Cats, by contrast, remained relatively uniform in size and shape, with natural variations in coat color and pattern but without the extreme physical diversity seen in dogs. This relative uniformity reflects the cat's path to domestication. Because cats largely domesticated themselves and because humans valued them primarily for one task, rodent control, there was never the same pressure to breed for specialized variations. A cat that could catch mice was a good cat, regardless of its size, coat color, or other physical traits. This meant that cats spread through the world maintaining more of their ancestral characteristics than dogs did. The period we call the Middle Ages, roughly spanning from the 5th to the 15th centuries in Europe, brought dramatic changes to the cat's status in Western society. After centuries of being valued, cats found themselves increasingly viewed with suspicion, fear, and hostility. This shift had profound consequences, leading to widespread persecution of cats and, indirectly, to one of history's greatest catastrophes. The early medieval period, from roughly the 5th to the 10th centuries, saw cats continuing their practical role in society without significant controversy. Monasteries, those centers of learning and agriculture in early medieval Europe, kept cats to protect stored grain and precious manuscripts from rodents. There are records of monasteries budgeting for cat food, treating cats as legitimate workers deserving of support. Irish monks, renowned for their scholarship and manuscript illumination, occasionally drew cats in the margins of their manuscripts, sometimes with great affection and humor. One famous example comes from the 9th century, a poem written in Old Irish by a monk comparing his scholarly work to his cat's hunting. I in Pengrubon my cat, 'tis a like task we are at. Hunting mice is his delight, hunting words I sit all night. The poem continues in this vein, celebrating the parallel between the monk's intellectual pursuit and his cat's physical one, with clear affection for the cat. This gives us a glimpse of cats in early medieval monastic life, working companions whose presence was pleasant and whose skills were valued. However, as medieval society developed, particularly from the 11th century onward, attitudes began to shift. The rise of urban centers, increasingly powerful church institutions, and complex social anxieties created an environment where cats' mysterious qualities, once seen as fascinating or divine, became sinister. Several factors contributed to growing suspicion of cats. Their nocturnal habits, their association with independent women, who often kept cats as companions and pest controllers, their refusal to submit to authority in the way dogs did, their glowing eyes in darkness, their silent movement, All of these traits, which had made cats sacred in Egypt and appreciated in other cultures, now made them suspect in the increasingly Christian and increasingly paranoid atmosphere of medieval Europe. Cats became associated with heresy and witchcraft. This association solidified over time, reaching a terrible peak in the late medieval and early modern periods. The reasoning was twisted but effective. Witches were said to have familiar spirits in animal form. Cats, being mysterious and independent, were the perfect candidates for such spirits. Therefore, cats, especially black cats, must be servants of the devil. Pope Gregory IX, in a papal bull issued in 1243, made explicit connections between cats and devil worship in his denunciations of heresy. While the bull primarily targeted supposed heretics, its lurid descriptions of cat-worshipping cults contributed to growing fear of cats. Later papal and church authorities reinforced these associations, and cats found themselves targeted in witch hunts and heresy persecutions. The persecution of cats took various forms across medieval Europe. Cats were killed in large numbers, sometimes in ritualized ways that seem shocking today. In many towns and cities, festivals involved throwing cats from towers, burning them in bonfires, or torturing them in other ways, all supposedly to drive out evil or bring good luck. The specifics varied by region, but the underlying hostility was widespread. In some places, cat parts were used in building foundations, walled up alive or dead, supposedly to protect the building from bad luck or evil spirits. Archaeological excavations of medieval buildings occasionally uncover cat remains in walls or under floors, grim evidence of these practices. Whether these cats were alive when immured is debated, but even if they were already dead, the practice reflects deep superstition surrounding cats. Women accused of witchcraft, and there were many thousands across Europe during the medieval and early modern witch hunting periods, were often accused of keeping cats as familiars. Owning a cat, especially if you were an elderly woman living alone, could be taken as evidence of witchcraft. Countless women and their cats were executed together, the cats often killed in the same brutal ways as their human companions, burned, drowned, or hanged. This persecution of cats had consequences beyond the obvious cruelty to the animals themselves. With cat populations suppressed, rodent populations exploded. Medieval cities, already crowded and unsanitary by modern standards, became even more infested with rats and mice. Food stores were more vulnerable. Disease spread more easily among the dense rodent populations. Then came the Black Death. In 1347, plague arrived in Europe, carried by fleas on rats that traveled on merchant ships from Asia. Over the next several years, this pandemic killed somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of Europe's entire population, perhaps 50 million people or more. It was one of the most catastrophic mortality events in recorded human history. The relationship between cat persecution and the plague's devastation is complex and debated by historians. Rats existed in large numbers throughout medieval Europe regardless of cat populations. The particular species of rat that carried the plague fleas, the black rat or ship rat, was well established in European cities. However, it's reasonable to suggest that larger cat populations might have limited rat populations to some degree, potentially slowing the plague's spread. More significantly, the plague experience didn't immediately rehabilitate cats in public opinion. The same superstitious mindset that had led to cat persecution now sought scapegoats for the plague. Some blamed cats, dogs, and other animals for spreading disease, leading to even more animal killings. Others blamed Jews, leading to pogroms. Others blamed the alignment of planets or God's wrath. The true cause, bacteria spread by flea bites from infected rats, wouldn't be understood for another 500 years. Yet cats survived. Despite widespread persecution, cats proved remarkably resilient. They continued to live on the margins of human society, in barns and alleyways, on ships and in warehouses. Their reproductive rate was high. A pair of cats and their offspring could produce many descendants in just a few years if conditions allowed. They required no care from humans if prey was available. This resilience meant that even in the darkest periods of persecution, cat populations could recover relatively quickly when pressure eased. Moreover, not everyone participated in cat persecution. Even during the height of anti-cat sentiment, there were always people who valued cats for their practical benefits or simply enjoyed their company. Farmers and merchants, practical people concerned with protecting their goods, continued keeping cats regardless of superstition. Some nobles kept cats as pets despite church disapproval. Written records from the period show continued affection for cats among at least some segments of society. Interestingly, the medieval period also saw the beginning of what would eventually become cat breeding. The distinctive features of cats from different regions were noted. The long-haired cats from Persia and Turkey, the unusual cats from Southeast Asia, the sturdy cats of Northern Europe. While these weren't yet formalized breeds in the modern sense, there was growing awareness of feline variety and, among some people, appreciation for unusual or beautiful cats. Medieval art provides a mixed picture of cat status. Some religious art depicts cats in positive or neutral contexts. In nativity scenes, in depictions of peaceful domestic life, in margins of illuminated manuscripts. Other art shows cats in negative contexts, associated with sin or the devil. The variety suggests that attitudes toward cats were never monolithic, even during periods of general hostility. By the end of the Middle Ages, as Europe entered the Renaissance and then the early modern period, attitudes toward cats were beginning to shift again, though the rehabilitation would be slow and uneven. The age of reason and scientific inquiry that was dawning would eventually challenge the superstitions that had led to cat persecution, though witch hunts and cat killings would continue in some places well into the 18th century. The medieval experience left scars on the cat's relationship with Western culture that would take centuries to fully heal. Even today, superstitions about black cats persist in some cultures, pale echoes of medieval fears. But cats themselves, resilient and adaptable as ever, survived this dark chapter and were positioned for a remarkable comeback in the centuries ahead. As Europe emerged from the Middle Ages into the Renaissance and then the Enlightenment, the cultural position of cats began a slow but steady improvement. This transformation wasn't sudden or uniform. Old superstitions died hard, but gradually, cats regained and then exceeded their former status in European society. The Renaissance, beginning in Italy in the 14th century and spreading across Europe over the next 2 centuries, brought renewed interest in classical learning, including the appreciation for cats found in ancient Egyptian and Greco-Roman sources. Renaissance scholars, reading classical texts, encountered positive depictions of cats and began to question medieval superstitions. This intellectual shift created space for cats to be viewed more favorably. Artists of the Renaissance and later periods increasingly included cats in their work, often in positive or neutral domestic contexts. Leonardo da Vinci famously produced numerous sketches of cats, capturing their movements and postures with his characteristic attention to natural reality. These weren't symbolic cats or demonic cats. They were careful studies of actual feline anatomy and behavior, reflecting the Renaissance interest in observing and understanding the natural world. Other artists followed suit. Cats appear in paintings by Tintoretto, Veronese, and many other Renaissance masters, usually as elements of domestic scenes, adding life and naturalism to depictions of everyday life. In Northern European art, particularly Dutch and Flemish painting, cats became increasingly common in genre scenes, paintings of ordinary people in ordinary settings. These paintings show cats curled by fires, playing with children, begging for food, sleeping on windowsills. the familiar behaviors that anyone who has shared a home with a cat would recognize. The age of exploration, roughly spanning the 15th to 17th centuries, carried cats to new territories on an unprecedented scale. European ships exploring the coasts of Africa, Asia, and the Americas almost always carried cats. These weren't exotic pets or luxury items. They were essential crew members protecting ship's stores from rats during long voyages. When European powers established colonies in the Americas, cats came with them. Cats likely first arrived in the New World with Spanish and Portuguese conquistadors in the late 15th and early 16th centuries. British, French, and Dutch colonists brought cats to North America in the 16th and 17th centuries. These cats found a new world that contained no domesticated mammals, aside from dogs, but plenty of prey. They adapted readily to American environments, from the Caribbean to Canada, from coastal settlements to frontier outposts. Cats also reached Australia and New Zealand with European colonization in the 18th and 19th centuries. In these isolated island ecosystems that had evolved without mammalian predators, cats would eventually become serious ecological problems, devastating native bird and small mammal populations. But this understanding came later. Initially, cats were simply valued additions to colonial life, familiar animals from home that also served useful purposes. Ships' cats became the stuff of legend and lore. Naval officers and merchant captains often kept favorite cats, and some of these animals achieved fame. Cats served on ships of all kinds: warships, merchant vessels, whaling ships, exploration vessels. They endured storms, battles, and the hardships of long voyages. The tradition of ship's cats continued well into the 20th century and contributed to the spread of cats to virtually every corner of the world accessible by sea. The 17th and 18th centuries saw cats becoming more common and accepted as household companions in Europe. Written accounts from this period show cats in homes across the social spectrum. Upper-class households kept cats, as did merchants, artisans, and peasants. Cats' practical value remained important, but increasingly, people also valued them as companions. Cardinal Richelieu, the powerful minister of France in the early 17th century, was famous for his love of cats. He reportedly kept dozens of cats in his residences and left money in his will for their continued care after his death. Such high-profile cat lovers helped make cat ownership respectable again, countering lingering medieval prejudices. Writers and intellectuals of the Enlightenment often mentioned cats affectionately in their works. Samuel Johnson, the great English writer and lexicographer of the 18th century, doted on his cat Hodge, personally going out to buy oysters for the cat's dinner. When Hodge died, Johnson mourned him genuinely. Other literary figures of the era, Montaigne, Perrault, Pope, wrote about cats with appreciation, treating them as worthy subjects for intellectual attention rather than as objects of suspicion. This period also saw the beginning of commercial cat food, though not in forms we would recognize today. Before the 19th century, cats ate table scraps, caught their own prey, or received basic foods like fish heads or ruffle. But by the 18th century, some urban cat owners were purchasing fish or other foods specifically for their cats, and street vendors in cities like London sold cat food to those who could afford it. The scientific revolution and Enlightenment brought more rational approaches to understanding animals. Natural history, the systematic study and classification of living things, became an important field of study. Carl Linnaeus, the Swedish botanist who established the modern system of biological nomenclature, classified the domestic cat as Felis catus in 1758, giving it a proper place in the natural order. This scientific recognition represented a shift from viewing cats through the lens of superstition to seeing them as subjects worthy of empirical study. Anatomists and physiologists studied cat anatomy, contributing to understanding of mammalian biology. Cats' relatively large brains, complex nervous systems, and sophisticated sensory abilities impressed scientists. Their eyes, capable of seeing in very low light, became objects of particular scientific interest. The reflective layer behind a cat's retina, the tapetum lucidum, which causes cats' eyes to glow when light hits them, was identified and studied, explaining what had once seemed mysterious or supernatural. Cat behavior also attracted scientific attention. Naturalists observed and recorded feline hunting techniques, social behaviors, and vocalizations. The cat's purr, unique among domestic animals, fascinated researchers, though understanding the mechanism of purring would not come until much later. Early ethologists, scientists studying animal behavior, recognized cats as exhibiting complex, intelligent behaviors worthy of serious study. The 18th century also saw early forms of selective breeding, though nothing like the formalized cat fancy that would emerge in the Victorian era. Travelers returning from distant lands sometimes brought unusual cats as curiosities. Long-haired cats from Persia, unusual colored cats from Asia. These exotic cats were prized by wealthy collectors and were sometimes bred selectively to preserve or enhance their distinctive features. By the end of the Enlightenment and the beginning of the 19th century, cats had firmly re-established themselves in European and increasingly global culture. They were common in cities and countryside, aboard ships and in homes, serving both practical purposes and providing companionship. The stage was set for cats to achieve unprecedented popularity and formal recognition in the Victorian era that was about to begin. The Victorian era, spanning the reign of Queen Victoria from 1837 to 1901, witnessed a transformation in how cats were perceived, kept, and valued. This period saw cats evolve from utilitarian animals that happened to be pleasant companions into deliberate pets, subjects of organized breeding and participants in formal exhibitions. The Victorian era created the modern cat fancy, the world of cat shows, breed standards, and pedigreed cats. Victorian Britain was undergoing massive social and economic changes. Industrialization created a prosperous middle class with disposable income and leisure time. Urbanization concentrated populations in cities where pet keeping, particularly of cats, was practical in ways it hadn't been in rural agricultural society. The Victorian obsession with classification, improvement, and respectability extended to animals, creating an environment where formal cat breeding and showing could flourish. The pivotal moment came on July 13, 1871, when Harrison Weir organized the first formal cat show at the Crystal Palace in London. This event fundamentally changed cat history. Weir, an artist and animal enthusiast, had long believed that cats deserved the same attention and respect given to dogs, which already had established shows and breeding clubs. The Crystal Palace show displayed 160 cats in cages arranged by color and other characteristics. Thousands of visitors attended, fascinated by the variety of cats on display and the novel idea of judging them by formal standards. The show featured everything from working cats to exotic imports, from common mousers to the pets of nobility. Queen Victoria herself was represented. 2 of her blue Persian cats were entered in the show. The success of the Crystal Palace show sparked a phenomenon. Cat shows began to be organized throughout Britain and soon spread to other countries. By the 1880s, cat shows were held regularly in major British cities, and the practice had spread to continental Europe and North America. The first American cat show was held at Madison Square Garden in New York in 1895, attracting both exhibitors and crowds of spectators. These early shows required the development of standards, criteria for judging what made a good example of a particular type of cat. Harrison Weir and other early cat fanciers established the first breed standards, describing ideal characteristics for different varieties of cats. These standards covered everything from head shape and ear placement to coat color and texture, from body proportions to temperament. The concept of cat breeds as formalized entities with specific characteristics maintained through selective breeding largely dates to this Victorian period. Before this time, cats certainly varied. Everyone recognized long-haired cats versus short-haired, different colors and patterns, cats from different regions with distinctive features. But these weren't formalized into breeds with written standards and pedigree records. Persian cats, with their long, flowing coats and flat faces, became one of the first recognized breeds and quickly became extremely popular. These cats had been imported from Persia and Turkey in earlier centuries, but Victorian breeders refined them through selective breeding, emphasizing the long coat and particular facial structure. Persian cats became status symbols, kept by wealthy families and featured prominently in cat shows. Siamese cats, imported from Thailand in the 1860s, caused a sensation with their color-pointed coats, blue eyes, and vocal nature. These cats looked unlike any European had seen before. The first Siamese cats in Britain were gifts to British diplomats from the King of Siam. They were initially controversial. Some found them beautiful and exotic, others thought them ugly and strange, but they quickly gained devoted followers. By the end of the Victorian era, Siamese cats were well established in the cat fancy and beginning to be bred in substantial numbers. British Shorthairs, descended from common British working cats, were refined and standardized during this period. These sturdy, round-faced cats represented native British stock, and there was patriotic pride in elevating them to formal breed status. Harrison Weir himself was particularly fond of British Shorthairs, seeing them as deserving equal status with exotic imports. The Manx cat, with its naturally occurring taillessness, gained formal recognition. These cats from the Isle of Man had long been known, but Victorian fanciers created breed standards for them and began breeding them selectively. The genetic basis of the Manx cat's taillessness wouldn't be understood until the 20th century, but Victorian breeders worked with the characteristic, establishing lines that reliably produced tailless or short-tailed kittens. Russian Blues, Abyssinians, and other breeds all gained formal recognition during the late Victorian and Edwardian periods. Each had its champions, breeders who worked to establish and maintain breed characteristics. Breeding records were kept with increasing care, establishing pedigrees that could be traced through multiple generations. This formalization of cat breeding led to the establishment of cat clubs and registries. The National Cat Club was founded in Britain in 1887 to register pedigrees and organize shows. Similar organizations followed in other countries. These clubs maintained stud books, records of breeding, and established rules for registration. To be officially recognized as a purebred cat of a particular breed, a cat needed documented ancestry tracing back to registered cats. The Victorian era also saw changes in how ordinary people kept cats. Middle-class households increasingly kept cats purely as companions rather than working animals. While cats still often caught mice, this was no longer their primary purpose in many homes. They were pets, family members, living indoors and receiving care and attention. Commercial cat food began to appear in the late Victorian era. James Spratt, who had already found success with dog biscuits, introduced cat food in the form of baked biscuits in the 1870s. These early commercial cat foods were primitive by modern standards, but they represented an important shift. Cats were now important enough commercially to justify manufactured food products. Cat care literature flourished during this period. Books about cat keeping, cat breeding, and cat diseases appeared in substantial numbers. Harrison Weir wrote Our Cats and All About Them in 1889, a comprehensive guide to cat care and breeding that became widely popular. Other authors produced similar works, creating a body of literature about cats that treated them seriously as subjects worthy of study and careful management. Veterinary care for cats improved during the Victorian era, though it still lagged behind care for horses and dogs. Veterinarians began to specialize in small animals, and some developed expertise specifically in treating cats. The first veterinary schools began to include instruction in cat diseases and treatment. This was important. Cats have unique physiology and are sensitive to many medications that are safe for dogs, making specialized knowledge crucial for their treatment. Cat photography emerged as a popular pursuit. The Victorian era saw photography become more accessible, and cats were frequent subjects. Early cat photographs show Victorian cats in domestic settings, often with their owners, sometimes posed elaborately, sometimes caught in natural poses. These photographs give us a window into Victorian cat keeping and show cats that would be recognizable to modern cat owners, similar in size and appearance to modern cats, engaged in familiar behaviors. The Victorian era also produced Louis Wain, whose whimsical and increasingly surreal cat illustrations became enormously popular. Wain anthropomorphized cats, showing them engaged in human activities, dancing, playing cards, attending parties. His work was light-hearted but revealed the affection Victorians felt for cats. Wain's cats were almost always shown as cheerful, playful, and endearing, contributing to increasingly positive public perception of cats. Not everyone embraced the cat fancy. Some critics saw it as frivolous, a waste of time and money. Others disliked the emphasis on appearance over working ability. Some working-class people viewed pedigreed cats as pretentious affectations of the wealthy. But these criticisms didn't stop the growth of the cat fancy. By the end of Victoria's reign, cat shows were established institutions. Cat breeding was a recognized hobby and business, and cats had achieved a cultural status in Western society they'd never held before, at least outside of ancient Egypt. The 20th century brought scientific tools and approaches that finally allowed researchers to understand cat domestication at a fundamental level. Genetics, evolutionary biology, animal behavior studies, and archaeological science combined to reveal how cats transformed from wild hunters into domestic companions. These scientific insights deepened our understanding of the unique nature of the human-cat relationship. The genetic revolution in biology, accelerating through the late 20th and early 21st centuries, provided unprecedented insights into cat domestication. By sequencing cat DNA and comparing domestic cats with their wild relatives, researchers could trace the origins of domestication with precision impossible in earlier eras. A landmark study published in 2007 analyzed the DNA of nearly 1,000 cats, both domestic and wild, from across Europe, Asia, and Africa. The researchers examined mitochondrial DNA, which is passed down through maternal lines, allowing them to trace family relationships across thousands of years. Their findings confirmed that all domestic cats descended from Felis sylvestris libica, the Near Eastern wildcat, and specifically from 5 founding maternal lineages in the Fertile Crescent region. This genetic evidence supported what archaeologists had suspected from bone evidence and ancient art, that cat domestication began in the Near East around 10 to 12,000 years ago, coinciding with the agricultural revolution. But the genetics revealed something more. The DNA showed that domestic cats had much less genetic diversity than would be expected if humans had been actively breeding them for specific traits over thousands of years. This low diversity indicated that, unlike dogs, cats had been subject to relatively little artificial selection. Further genetic analysis revealed that the genes most strongly associated with domestication in cats were those affecting fear response and reward-seeking behavior. Cats that were less fearful of humans and more willing to approach them for potential food rewards were the ones that succeeded in the human environment. This genetic predisposition toward reduced fear became more common over generations, not because humans were deliberately selecting for it, but because these cats simply did better in the ecological niche that humans had created. Interestingly, the genetic changes in cats were far fewer than those in dogs. When scientists compared dog genomes to wolf genomes, they found hundreds of genes that had been altered by domestication, affecting everything from coat color to skull shape to digestion. The changes in cat genomes were more subtle, affecting primarily behavior and temperament rather than physical form. This explains why cats look much more like their wild ancestors than dogs look like wolves. Domestication changed cats' behavior more than their bodies. Studies of cat coat colors and patterns revealed fascinating genetic complexity. The tabby pattern, with its distinctive stripes or spots, is the ancestral form. It's the pattern of wild cats, the default cat pattern before humans influenced cat breeding. The genetic mutation that produces solid-colored cats appeared relatively early in domestication, certainly thousands of years ago, as ancient Egyptian art shows both tabby and solid-colored cats. Other color variations emerged through natural mutation and spread through cat populations. Orange cats, where orange coloring replaces black, result from a gene on the X chromosome, which is why most orange cats are male. Females need 2 copies of the orange gene to be orange, while males need only 1. Dilute colors like gray and cream result from genes that reduce pigment intensity. White cats, especially those with blue eyes, often carry genes that affect both pigmentation and hearing, which is why many white blue-eyed cats are deaf. Long hair in cats is a recessive genetic trait, requiring 2 copies of the long hair gene. This mutation probably occurred in cats living in cold climates where longer fur provided survival advantage. Once the mutation appeared, it could be maintained through breeding, leading to the long-haired Persian and similar breeds. The genetic studies showed that long hair appeared in multiple cat populations independently, suggesting it's a mutation that occurs relatively easily in cat genetics. Behavioral genetics revealed even more about what makes cats cats. Researchers studying cat behavior identified that domestic cats, even those raised without human contact, behaved differently from wild cats in key ways. They were less aggressive, more tolerant of other cats, and showed neotenic traits, retention of juvenile characteristics into adulthood. Domestic cats remain playful throughout their lives in ways that wild cats don't, continuing to exhibit kitten-like play behaviors even when fully grown. The cat's purr became a subject of scientific study. Researchers discovered that cats purr not just when content but also when stressed, injured, or giving birth. The purr frequency, typically between 25 and 50 Hz, falls within a range known to promote healing in bones and tissues. This has led to speculation that cats purr partly for self-healing purposes, using the vibrations therapeutically. Whether this is truly adaptive or coincidental remains debated, but it's a fascinating possibility. By the 1970s and 80s, cat food had become big business. Major corporations entered the market, bringing sophisticated marketing and distribution. Cat food advertisements became common on television. Specialized formulas emerged: kitten food, senior cat food, food for specific health conditions. The science of feline nutrition advanced, with researchers determining cats' specific nutritional needs, including their requirement for taurine, an amino acid essential for cats but not for dogs or humans. When taurine deficiency was linked to heart disease and blindness in cats in the 1980s, manufacturers began supplementing cat food with taurine, dramatically improving feline health. Veterinary medicine for cats advanced enormously during the 20th century. Early in the century, veterinary care focused primarily on farm animals and horses, with limited attention to companion animals. This gradually changed as pet ownership increased. Veterinary schools expanded their curricula to include more extensive coverage of small animal medicine. Veterinarians began specializing in cats, recognizing that cats' unique physiology required specialized knowledge. The development of vaccines for feline diseases represented a major advance. Vaccines for feline panleukopenia, rabies, and later for feline leukemia virus and other diseases became available, dramatically reducing mortality from infectious disease. Spaying and neutering, once risky procedures, became routine, safe surgeries, making it practical to prevent unwanted litters while keeping cats as pets. Feline medicine became increasingly sophisticated. Diagnostic tools like X-rays, ultrasound, and blood testing became standard. Specialized procedures, cancer treatment, kidney transplants, orthopedic surgery, became available for cats, at least for owners able to afford them. Emergency veterinary clinics opened, providing 24-hour care. The level of medical care available to cats in the late 20th century would have been unimaginable a century earlier. This medical advancement came with increasing costs. Veterinary care for cats became expensive, leading to the development of pet insurance in the 1980s and 90s. Pet insurance, common in Europe but slower to catch on in North America, helped owners afford advanced care for their cats. The existence of sophisticated, expensive medical treatments for cats reflected how valuable these animals had become to their owners. People were willing to spend thousands of dollars to save or extend their cats' lives. The cat population itself grew dramatically during the 20th century. Estimated numbers are difficult to verify, but by the end of the century, there were likely more than 100 million pet cats in the United States alone, with hundreds of millions more worldwide. Cats became the most popular pet in many countries, outnumbering dogs as urban living made cats' smaller size and independent nature advantageous. This huge cat population created challenges. Unwanted cats, born to strays or surrendered by owners, overwhelmed animal shelters. Millions of cats were euthanized annually in shelters across the United States alone. This crisis led to the development of the animal welfare movement focused specifically on cats. Organizations like Alley Cat Allies, founded in 1990, promoted trap-neuter return programs for feral cats as an alternative to euthanasia. These programs stabilized and gradually reduced feral populations while avoiding the endless cycle of trap and kill that had proved ineffective. The rise of cat behaviorism as a field represented another 20th century development. Researchers and practitioners began to study cat behavior systematically, applying ethological principles to understand why cats behave as they do and how to address behavioral problems. Behaviorists like Pam Johnson Bennett wrote popular books explaining cat behavior to general audiences, helping owners understand their cats better. This scientific approach to cat behavior replaced earlier anthropomorphic or simplistic understandings. Cat showing and breeding continued to evolve throughout the 20th century. New breeds were developed or recognized, the ragdoll in the 1960s, the Bengal in the 1980s, numerous others. Some breeds were created by crossing domestic cats with wild species, like the Bengal, domestic cat x Asian leopard cat, or the Savannah, domestic cat x serval. These exotic breeds generated controversy, with critics questioning whether creating domestic cats with wild ancestors was ethical or desirable. The Cat Fanciers Association and other registry organizations established strict breeding standards and show rules. Cat shows became more elaborate and competitive. Champion show cats could be worth thousands of dollars and were bred carefully to maintain and enhance desired characteristics. However, show breeding also created health problems in some breeds through excessive focus on particular physical traits. Persian cats, bred for increasingly flat faces, developed breathing difficulties and eye problems. Scottish folds, bred for their folded ears, sometimes suffered painful cartilage problems. These health issues in purebred cats led to growing awareness that breeding should consider health and welfare, not just appearance. Responsible breeders began genetic testing to screen for hereditary diseases and working to breed away from problematic traits. The tension between appearance standards and animal welfare remains an ongoing issue in cat breeding. Despite the popularity of purebred cats, the vast majority of pet cats were and are mixed-breed animals, often called domestic shorthairs or domestic longhairs, or simply moggas in British terminology. These mixed-breed cats, with their diverse genetics, generally enjoy better health than many purebreds. They represent the continuation of the cat's original path, animals that breed according to their own choices, maintaining genetic diversity and hybrid vigor. As the 20th century gave way to the 21st, cats experienced yet another transformation in their relationship with humanity. They became global digital celebrities, subject to viral fame that would have been incomprehensible in any earlier era. The internet age transformed cats from private companions into public phenomena, shared and celebrated across digital networks reaching billions of people. The rise of internet cat culture began almost as soon as the internet reached mainstream adoption. In the early 2000s, funny cat pictures began circulating on forums and websites. These images, often captioned with humorous text and broken English, the famous lolcat or kitty pigeon format, became some of the internet's first viral content. Websites like I Can Has Cheeseburger, founded in 2007, aggregated these images, becoming hugely popular and demonstrating the internet's appetite for cat content. But internet cats truly exploded into mainstream consciousness with the rise of YouTube and other video platforms. Videos of cats doing amusing things, playing with toys, interacting with other animals, reacting with apparent surprise or confusion, became some of YouTube's most viewed content. Maru, a Japanese Scottish fold cat famous for jumping into boxes, accumulated hundreds of millions of views. Keyboard Cat, a video from 1984 of a cat appearing to play a piano, became a widespread internet meme in the late 2000s. The phenomenon reached new heights with Grumpy Cat, whose permanently grumpy-looking expression, caused by feline dwarfism and an underbite, made her an internet sensation starting in 2012. Grumpy Cat appeared on television, in commercials, on merchandise, and even in a movie. Her owner was able to quit work and manage Grumpy Cat's appearances and licensing full-time. When Grumpy Cat died in 2019, her death was reported by major news outlets worldwide. The death of a cat made headlines in the New York Times and the BBC. Social media platforms amplified internet cat culture even further. Instagram became home to countless cat celebrity accounts with millions of followers. Lil Bub, Nala Cat, Venus the Two-Faced Cat, and numerous others accumulated huge followings. These weren't just accounts posting random cat pictures. They were carefully managed brands with regular posting schedules, professional photography, and merchandising operations. Some cat Instagram accounts generate substantial income through sponsorships and endorsements. This digital cat culture reflects something deeper about cats and humans in the modern age. Cats' expressions and behaviors translate remarkably well to short video clips and still images. Their unpredictability makes them entertaining. Their apparent indifference or aloofness provides comedic contrast when they engage in silly behaviors. And perhaps most importantly, cats in funny or cute poses or situations provide a form of emotional relief and connection in an increasingly digital world. Research has shown that viewing cat content online can reduce stress and improve mood. People aren't just wasting time when they watch cat videos, they're engaging in a form of informal emotional self-care. The modern scientific understanding of cats continued to deepen in the 21st century. Researchers mapped the complete cat genome in 2007, opening new avenues for understanding feline genetics, evolution, and disease. This genomic data has been used to study everything from breed origins to hereditary diseases to the molecular mechanisms of domestication. veterinary medicine continued its rapid advancement. New treatments for cancer, kidney disease, diabetes, and other feline conditions appeared regularly. Surgical techniques became more sophisticated. Diagnostic tools like MRI and CT scanning, once available only for human medicine, became accessible for cats at specialized veterinary hospitals. The level of medical care available to cats in wealthy countries now rivals that available to humans in less developed parts of the world. However, this advanced care highlights growing disparities in cat welfare. In wealthy countries, many cats receive exceptional care: premium food, regular veterinary checkups, treatment for serious illnesses. In poorer countries, cats often receive minimal care, living semi-feral lives with little human intervention. Even within wealthy countries, there are enormous differences based on owner resources and commitment. Some cats receive thousands of dollars worth of medical care, while others are abandoned when they become ill. The purebred cat world continued evolving, with new breeds still being developed or recognized. Some of these new breeds pushed boundaries: hairless cats like the Sphenox, curly-haired cats like the Selkirk Rex, extremely small cats like the Munchkin, cats with unusual ears like the American Curl. Each new breed generated debate about whether pursuing these characteristics was ethical, particularly when they might affect the cat's health or welfare. Simultaneously, there was growing emphasis on adopting shelter cats rather than purchasing purebred animals. Animal welfare organizations promoted adopt, don't shop campaigns, highlighting the millions of homeless cats in shelters. Some jurisdictions banned or restricted pet store sales of cats to combat kitten mills. Large-scale breeding operations focused on profit over welfare. The pendulum of public opinion swung toward valuing all cats, regardless of pedigree, and toward ensuring that breeding was done responsibly with welfare as the priority. The outdoor cat controversy intensified in the 21st century. Environmental scientists documented the impact of domestic cats on wildlife populations, particularly birds and small mammals. Studies suggested that free-roaming domestic cats killed billions of birds annually in the United States alone. This led to heated debates between cat advocates, who argued that cats had a right to outdoor access, and conservation advocates, who pointed to the ecological damage caused by cat predation. Some jurisdictions responded with laws restricting cat ownership, requiring cats to be kept indoors or in enclosed outdoor spaces, limiting the number of cats per household, requiring licensing and registration. Australia, particularly concerned about cats' impact on native wildlife, implemented some of the strictest regulations, with some municipalities requiring cats to be kept indoors full-time. These regulations remained controversial, with cat owners arguing they were overly restrictive and enforcement proving difficult. The trap-neuter-return approach to managing feral cat colonies, controversial when first introduced, gained wider acceptance in many areas. Studies showed that TNR, consistently applied, could effectively stabilize and reduce feral populations over time, proving more humane and ultimately more effective than trap-and-kill programs. Volunteer networks organized TNR efforts in cities worldwide, trapping feral cats, having them spayed or neutered and vaccinated, then returning them to their territories to live out their lives without producing more kittens. Cat cafes, originating in Taiwan in the late 1990s and spreading through Japan and then worldwide, represented a new form of human-cat interaction. These establishments allowed customers to interact with cats while enjoying coffee or tea. For people unable to keep cats in their living situations, cat cafes provided temporary cat companionship. Many cat cafes partnered with shelters, showcasing adoptable cats, providing a service to both people and homeless animals. The COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 brought unexpected changes to the cat world. Lockdowns and work-from-home mandates meant people spent far more time at home, leading to a surge in pet adoptions. Shelters reported unprecedented adoption rates as isolated people sought companionship. Cats, well-suited to indoor living and requiring less intensive care than dogs, were particularly popular pandemic adoptions. This pandemic pet boom may have permanently increased cat ownership rates, as remote work remained common even after lockdowns ended. Modern cat culture reflects cats' complete integration into human society. In many countries, particularly in urban areas, cats are ubiquitous. They appear in advertising, are common subjects of art and photography, inspire countless memes and jokes, and are central characters in books, movies, and television shows. Cat ownership is normal across all demographic groups. Old and young, rich and poor, urban and rural, people of all backgrounds keep cats. Yet even as cats have become thoroughly domesticated, they retain essential wildness. A house cat, if released into an appropriate environment, can revert to hunting and living independently within a relatively short time. Cats haven't lost the skills and instincts of their wild ancestors. This duality, fully at home in human households yet retaining the capacity for independence, remains fundamental to what cats are and to their appeal. The modern scientific understanding recognizes that domestication didn't really finish the cat's evolution. Cats continue to adapt to living with humans, with new behaviors and characteristics appearing as cats adjust to contemporary environments. Indoor living is selecting for cats that are more sedentary, less anxious, more tolerant of confinement. The proliferation of breeds is creating diverse populations with different traits. Feral populations are adapting to urban environments in remarkable ways, learning to navigate cities, exploit human food sources, and survive in entirely human-created habitats. Looking forward from the present moment, the future of cats seems secure. They've proven extraordinarily successful, with populations in the hundreds of millions, established on every continent except Antarctica, living in nearly every conceivable human environment. They're loved by hundreds of millions of people, supported by massive industries producing food, medical care, and accessories. They're studied by scientists, celebrated in popular culture, and protected by laws and advocacy organizations. Yet challenges remain. Feral cat populations continue to pose welfare and environmental concerns. Breeding practices sometimes prioritize appearance over health. Access to veterinary care remains unequal. The environmental impact of cat food production, the resources required to feed hundreds of millions of obligate carnivores, is considerable. How society addresses these challenges will shape the future of human-cat relations. And so our long journey through 12,000 years comes to a close, bringing us back to this present moment, to the world we know, where cats sleep on sofas and keyboards, where they chase laser pointers and knock objects off tables, where they purr in our laps and occasionally bring us gifts of prey we'd rather not receive. Think about the extraordinary arc of this story. From wild hunters in the Middle Eastern hills to the cat curled beside you or in homes around the world. This journey spans the entire history of human civilization. Cats watched us invent agriculture and build cities. They traveled with Phoenician traders and Roman legions. They survived persecution and plague. They crossed oceans on sailing ships and reached every continent. They inspired Egyptian temples and internet memes. They adapted to every environment we created, from ancient granaries to modern apartments. The cat story is unique among domestic animals because cats never surrendered their independence. Dogs became our servants, working partners who evolved to take commands and seek our approval. Horses, cattle, sheep, all became dependent on us, shaped by our selection into forms that suited our purposes. But cats remain themselves. They chose to be near us but never chose to submit to us. Even now, a cat in your home is there by choice. tolerating your presence because we happen to provide comfortable environments, regular food, and sometimes pleasant companionship. This independence, this essential wildness preserved within the domestic, explains much of the cat's enduring appeal. When a cat chooses to sit with you, you've been chosen. When a cat purrs, you've been approved. When a cat brings you a toy or rubs against your leg, these are gifts freely given, not obligations fulfilled. The cat's affection is conditional, which makes it somehow more valuable when received. As you rest now, in this quiet moment, consider the continuity stretching backward through time. The purr you might hear is the same sound that comforted Egyptian children 4,000 years ago, that medieval monks heard in candlelit scriptoriums, that Victorian ladies heard in Catholic parlors. The soft weight of a sleeping cat, the gentle kneading of paws, the sudden mad dash across a room in pursuit of invisible prey. All of these were known to our ancestors across the centuries, points of connection across vast stretches of time. And looking forward, the story continues. Somewhere tonight, a kitten is being born, eyes closed, tiny and helpless, who will grow to be someone's companion. Somewhere, a shelter cat is being adopted, starting a new chapter. Somewhere, a cat is sleeping peacefully, dreaming whatever cats dream, while its human companion types at a keyboard or reads a book or simply sits, grateful for the company. The 12,000-year journey of cat domestication isn't finished. It continues in millions of homes tonight, in every interaction between cats and humans, in every small act of caring companionship. We are living history, part of a relationship that stretches from the deep past into the unknown future, a relationship built on mutual benefit, surprising affection, and the decision of wild animals to walk alongside humanity while never quite giving up their wild hearts. If you've enjoyed this journey through time, if you found something interesting or comforting or surprising in this long story, I'd be grateful if you take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are so many more stories to explore together, so many more journeys through history waiting to be taken. Until next time, rest well and may your dreams be peaceful and your tomorrow bright.